Well, I want to talk about your brilliant documentary films, including the last one, The Movement and the Madman. You know, Wheezy and I are students of the baby boom culture. And even knowing what we know about that period of time, Watergate and all that stuff, there were two revelations in this film for me. One was how much of an effect the anti-war movement had on changing America's mind. Because we thought that was just our generation blowing off steam. But it really did. Although Nixon would never admit it, it did get under his skin. And the second thing I was really rattled by and didn't know was how close Nixon came to actually using a nuclear weapon on North Vietnam. So there, even for those of us who have studied this time period, there's a lot to learn from this thing.
Well, thank you. It was a real pleasure to get to make that documentary for American Experience. They're still re-airing it every now and then on different public TV stations, and anyone can see it streaming online if they have PBS Passport or Amazon Prime or Canopy, the library streaming service. So it's out there for people to see, and I'd encourage anyone to watch it. But it was a great privilege to be able to make it, and it was a real research job for me. I mean, like you, Fritz, I lived through that time. I knew a lot about it. I was a participant in anti-war demonstrations in college and afterwards. And I thought I knew a lot because I really studied the war in Vietnam. And this was a revelation to me. You're absolutely right. The anti-war movement in some ways had an inferiority complex, that we never had the power to end the war. And it's true. It took a long, long time, far too long, to end the war in Vietnam. But at different stages of the war, the anti-war movement did really have an impact. And as you say, what we show in my film, which all centers on the year 1969, Nixon and Kissinger's first year in office as president, Nixon and his security advisor, they were planning a major escalation of the war in Vietnam. Even though he said he had a secret plan to end the war and he was starting to very, very, very slowly withdraw troops, what he was really planning to do was a major escalation of the war in the fall of '69. And he was threatening secretly the Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese, and the Russians all throughout the year, saying, look, if you don't accept our terms for a settlement, we are going to unleash holy hell. And what we're going to do, what that means is we're going to resume bombing the North. We're going to bomb the dikes. We might bomb the cities. This was all in the planning documents that we found from the National Security Council. They were going to considering mining Haiphong Harbor, all sorts of things, right up including using tactical nuclear weapons in North Vietnam. So that was the threat. And what happened, to give away my film, is that the anti-war movement just happened to be planning. They had no idea what Nixon and Kissinger were doing. They just happened to be planning what turned out to be the two biggest anti-war demonstrations in the history of the United States. Certainly to that point, actually the biggest demonstrations to that point around any issue in the United States. In the fall, October 15th, it was called the moratorium, and November 15th, which was a giant march in Washington, as many as 500,000 people, and a big march same time in San Francisco for people living in the West. And those two massive demonstrations pressured Nixon to back off. And even though he'd issued this ultimatum, he writes in his own memoir, I knew I couldn't bring it off. The country would have exploded.